In American English, common use of Caucasian refers to anyone who is descended from Europeans, but in actuality, Caucasian can refer to anyone from populations of Europe, North Africa, West, Central, and South Asia, regardless of skin tone. The Caucasian concept was first conceived by Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, a German scientist and anthropologist. He named it for the Caucasus Mountains and his admiration for the fair-skinned people there, which he thought were the archetype for humanity. Of course, he was wrong, as humanity came from Africa and migrated outward. In anthropology, Caucasoid race is an antiquated term that was divided into three groups on linguistic grounds: Aryan, Semitic, and Hamitic. Aryan in this sense includes all the Indo-European languages, including Punjabi, Bengali, Hindi, and Urdu. This of course means that people that inhabit the Indian subcontinent are in fact Caucasian. This fact was used to argue a United States Supreme Court case in 1923 named United States versus Bhagat Singh Thind. At the time in America, only free Caucasians were permitted to become naturalized citizens. Bhagat argued that as an Indian he belonged to the Aryan and therefore Caucasian race. The court decided that while anthropologically he was indeed Caucasian, it did not meet the everyday understanding of what Caucasian means to the average American person, which of course means simply having white skin and being descended from European ancestry. In addition, they pointed out that anthropologists could not agree on what exactly was a Caucasian, with some ethnologists discrediting the Aryan theory. In addition, Associate Justice George Sutherland argued that Aryans in the Punjabi region were not able to maintain the purity of their Aryan blood, and have intermixed with the darker-skinned Dravidians that also inhabited the Indian subcontinent. Of course, this ignoring the fact that many American citizens who identify as white also have Native American and African blood in them even at the time of the court case. The court's decision was only overthrown after World War II when support for Indians grew, and President Truman signed the Luce-Celler Act in 1946, which reversed the previous court's ruling. Today, the term Caucasian is rarely used in the academic field, both in anthropology, where race is seen as a purely social construct, and also in medical science, where response to drugs can vary depending on ethnicity, found broad classifications like Caucasian extremely unhelpful. So now you know better, and that was Enigma Hood's Greatest Misconceptions.
Caucasus Mountains. So when you hear the term white Caucasian male, there's something behind that to look into. White Caucasian male.
Black, a person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. So wait, there are different black racial groups in Africa? I thought there was only one black race. See how they have tricked you? Notice they named no nations. Hispanic, a person of Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Central or South American or other Spanish culture or origin, regardless of race. White, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. Now my question becomes, how many so-called white people do you know that has origins in any of the original peoples of North Africa? Notice, for the definition of black, it says a person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. Do you not see the trickery? You see, this is a caste system borrowed from India, with white being the highest class and black being the lowest class. It has absolutely nothing to do with your skin tone, as there are no people with black skin, just like there are no people with white skin. This is a socio-political construct that has been accepted into the minds of some of our brightest. We contract ourselves into being black with the signing of the birth certificate and other documents like the Social Security application. Mostafa Hefni, a businessman from Detroit, an immigrant from Africa, namely Egypt, working towards naturalization as a U.S. citizen, heard that the Small Business Association was granting loans to black-owned businesses. He applied and was turned down on the grounds that he was not black. The Small Business Administration's explanation, according to the Detroit office, was that black loans are intended only for those whose ancestors suffered under slavery and Jim Crow, and that he could not simply waltz in from Africa and claim to be black. Hefney demanded a formal hearing and lost. The excuse changed, however. The court ruled that federal regulations forbid immigrants from North African nations, including Egypt, from calling themselves black, no matter what they look like. He lost his appeal, and because of the federal guidelines, he was still ruled to be white.
I am a black Egyptian. My father is much darker than I am. My mother is lighter than I am. In Egypt, people are identified by the religion first, not the race. So in Egypt, if you are Christian, you are a minority person. But if you're black, you're not a minority person. You are a part of the mainstream society. And I came from this background. And in Egypt, you identify as Arab and as Muslim. And in this country, when I first came, I identified myself as Arab American and Muslim first. And gradually, I became to identify myself as black. I came to the US in 1978. And I became US citizen in 1985. When I became a US resident, I was told by the Immigration and Naturalization that I'm white. And I told them that I'm black, and they said, no, in this country, you are white. All Arabs in this country, all Arab immigrants are white. I didn't pay much attention in the beginning to this, because in the Arab world, we identify with our ethnicity first as Arabs, and then with the race second as black or white or whatever. But in this country, you identify with your racial group first and then with your ethnicity second. Gradually, I became black first and Arab second. And I rejected my white classification publicly for the first time in 1987, in February, as a panelist in a function sponsored by the Association of the Study of Black Life and History in Detroit. I said that I belong to two minority groups. I am Arab American and Black American, and I'm racially black and ethnically Egyptian. I was harassed by my employer right after that. I worked for a white school district. The superintendent is white, all the associate superintendents are white, even though that we provide services to 30% black population. But the organization is white and the approach is very white. The attitude towards me changed completely after I went out publicly and rejected my white classification. One coworker came to me and told me, a white coworker came to me and told me right after the function that he met with the superintendent, and if I don't keep my mouth shut, my educational career is over. He said, you have nothing to do with these people, you have a history and a culture. These people came from the jungle, you have nothing to do with them. These people lie and steal. When I see one of them in my neighborhood, I call the police. And I was told by the director of general education, who is retired now, in '88, I was told by him that I get people angry when I say that I'm black Egyptian. If I just say that I'm Egyptian, I would get along. I have to add that I was denied promotion twice because I chose black classification. This is part of my 2 lawsuits against my employer, which are currently pending. 2 lawsuits.
Now, just for the education of our viewership, why don't you share with us a breakdown of Egypt as it is today, insofar as blacks or combinations thereof of European descent and what have you?
We don't have Egyptians of European descent in Egypt. We have a population which is basically a mixture of ancient Egyptian blacks who intermarried with Arabs right after the Arab conquest. The ancient Egyptian population was brown and black before the Arab conquest. But before the Arab conquest came the Greeks. It was the ancient Egyptian population was in Egypt for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptian population was brown and black, and the Greeks came in 300 BC, and they started to intermarry with the local population, and then the Romans came and ruled from 70 BC until they were conquered by the Arabs and kicked out by the Arabs in the 7th century. And these people intermarried with the Egyptian Copts, and they made the pigmentation of the Egyptians, the Copts, much lighter because of this intermarriage with Europeans.
Now, you're an educator, okay? Now, how do you deal with situations when you practice your profession insofar as dealing with the mythology or the misconceptions about Egypt being a white civilization? How do you deal with that?
this is a big problem because Egypt, the ancient Egyptian civilization was a black civilization, and ancient Egyptians were black according to the Greek scholars and the Roman scholars. Ancient Egypt became white only in the 19th century and in the 20th century. And the scholar who is responsible for this is Seligman, the noted anthropologist from England, Seligman. White supremacy argues that blacks are inferior than white intellectually. They are subhuman and they are incapable of building a civilization. White supremacy had one dilemma until Seligman came. The dilemma was ancient Egypt was black according to the Greek and the Roman scholars. 10 of them said that, including Aristotle and Plato. 10 of them said that in writing. They had this dilemma. Ancient Egyptian was black, so if blacks are inferior intellectually and are incapable of building a civilization, how come the ancient Egyptians built a civilization? Seligman found the solution for this dilemma. He came up with a theory called the Hamite theory. He separated the blacks who built a civilization in Egypt and Ethiopia from the rest of the black race, and he called them brown-skinned whites, or the Hamites. So Seligman saved white supremacy from this dilemma, and all the white scholars followed him from that time on. This was at the end of the 19th century. And since that time, white scholarship says that ancient Egypt is white.
Mustafa Hefni is currently working on his doctorate degree at Wayne State University. His dissertation topic is a content analysis of the treatment of ancient Egypt in world history textbooks. And just how far is this determined Egyptian willing to go to be classified black?
I want to carry my case all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary.